Hello. Good afternoon. Am I audible, Kavita?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, so then I'll start. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on measurement of uncertainty in food microbiological testing. This is the second seminar webinar in the series. The first one was on the chemical testing. And for those who have attended my earlier seminar webinar, they probably now know what is the concept of uncertainty in layman's language. So let me just proceed without wasting much time. It's just 1 hour webinar and we have a lot to cover. So let us start with the layman's concept of uncertainty. So I'm sure now you're sitting in front of your laptops looking at this webinar, and you have a laptop, and if I tell you that tell me what is the length of this laptop, and then you would say that it is probably 20 centimeters. So now when I ask you, are you confident about this measurement? Okay, and are you sure that it is exactly 20 centimeters in the length? Then probably you would say no, you are not really very sure, 100% sure that it is 20 centimeters. Why? Because you're not sure of the sensitivity or the calibration of the measuring device, which is a scale in this case. Okay, so you are not sure whether the scale is calibrated, it is really sensitive to measure the length. Okay, so that is why you would not be sure. Also, you do not know exactly where the laptop edge ends and what exactly is the end point of the measurement, and that is why probably you would say that I'm not really sure whether this particular laptop has a length of 20 centimeters. But now can you say that if the laptop, if I tell you, give you an option that you can choose a range, okay, then you can probably say that it is not different than plus minus 2 centimeters. Okay, so if this is your answer, or plus minus 3 centimeters, whatever it is, then this plus minus 2 centimeter, okay, which deviation we call it, this actually is the in scientific language we call it uncertainty. Okay, so what would you say about the length of the laptop now? You would say that the laptop is no longer than 22 centimeters and no shorter than 18 centimeters. The true value of the length of the laptop probably lies within this range. Okay, so now I've got all you convinced, you know, that the length is between 18 centimeters and 22 centimeters. But you still do not know the true value of the length of the laptop, okay, because the true value is an absolute value and it cannot be really determined correctly. Okay, so you can just get close to the true value. Okay, now this is a very simple example in day-to-day life, but we today are dealing with a topic which is on microbiology, and microbiology we deal with live microorganisms. So we cannot really find out what is the true value of a contamination in a particular sample. Okay, so we just take a random guess that yes, probably this is the value that could exist in a particular sample. Okay, so that is why this true value concept has to be very clear to us, that there is, you really cannot find out true value. So what is uncertainty? It is a parameter associated with the result of a measurement that characterizes dispersion of the values that could reasonably be contributed to the measurement. Okay, so uncertainty is a parameter to express variation in the result or data. Okay, and we are aware that every data, I mean, that's why as microbiologists you perform every experiment in duplicates. Okay, you take multiple readings. Why do you do that? Because you know that there is a variation in the result. Now just to give you a quick idea, okay, origin of uncertainty lies back in 1927, when this physicist Heisenberg wanted to he was working on uncertainties, and he found out that if one tried to measure position and momentum of a particle at the same time, you would have a lot of uncertainties. Okay, and he presented this work in a paper called Uncertainty Principle in 1927. So this goes long back to 1927. Okay, unfortunately for microbiology, somehow the work began very late, because I have been referring to a lot of documents recently for this webinar, and found out that very few contributors have really worked towards finding out uncertainty in microbiology analysis. Okay, so recently only, I think from 2000, I think it has gained much attention, and therefore this is still, you know, being worked upon, and not much data really is available on the microbiological uncertainties. Now, what we will do today, we will first find out, we'll see uncertainty sources. Then there are various terms which are used in connection with uncertainty measurement, especially with respect to microbiology. So we will see those. We'll find out, we will see the calculations, how they are done, how to report the results. Then there is a small concept called decision rule. Okay, and this unfortunately is not really worked upon very well till now for microbiology. It has been worked out for chemical testing, but not for really microbiology. But still, just for understanding purpose, I have included it in the webinar. And then if the time limit is there, we will do question answers. So basically, coming to food microbiology, there are two types of organisms that generally we check. We check pathogens, and we generally check spoilage organism as far as the safety of the food is concerned. And so basically, there are, if you consider the microbiological test methods, okay, so there are quantitative tests, okay, wherein you report the result as a count, okay, so you count the colonies, and you report the result as CFU per gram or CFU per ml. Okay, so this is one type of test. Then there is a qualitative test, which wherein you actually enrich, you take a food sample and you actually enrich you isolate the organism and you enrich. Okay, so that if there was one organism initially, you would actually enrich it and make it 100 so that it is detectable, something like that. So that will give you a result in terms of present and absent. Okay, and the third, which is a very classic and a very different kind of a test in microbiology, which is MPN test. Okay, now I being a chemist, when I first got to know what is this MPN, I was you know, a little confused with the MPN test. But I guess this works well. I mean, it has stood the test of the time, and so due consideration also should be given to MPN. Okay, so we will do that as well. Now let us see what, if at all, there are any other attendees than microbiologists. Just for their benefit, would like to tell you what is how the microorganisms grow. So basically, they grow in the exponential way. Okay, so like we have these rumors spreading in, and the pandemic, that is the best example I think I would give. You know, it just grows exponentially. Okay, so or the death due to compound interest. So these are all examples of exponential growth. Okay. So what is this? We will just find out. So how would you do that? Is that, let us take a simple example. We take a culture of E. coli, okay, and we actually sample it, a culture of E. coli, and every at equal time intervals we take out a sample. We basically we incubate it and we check what is the growth. Okay, so these periodic samplings are plated to determine the viable count, that is the CFU. Okay, and typically let us assume that 8 hours is the test. Okay, and here we have to remember that we are supplying enough nutrients and other conditions, temperature, etc. Okay, so that the growth is happening. Okay, so now when we do that, generally we know that 20 minutes is the reproduction cycle of a typical microorganism, a bacteria. Okay, so in 20 minutes the one colony will become 2 colonies. Okay, so you can see I've made out a table, and you can see that in 480 minutes we have 83,88,608 colonies of bacteria, E. coli. Okay, so 480 minutes is nothing but 8 hours. So just in 8 hours we have this kind of a population of microorganisms. Now we said that we will plot it. Okay, we want to find out how they grow. Okay, so this is how it will look. Now what happens is that if you see initial readings are all at down. Okay, you feel that there is nothing happening there. Okay, and suddenly at somewhere at 450 or so it just starts picking up, and at 540 it is, it has reached its maximum level, is what we feel. So what actually happening is here is that this curve is kind of misleading. Okay, and it does not give you any good information about what is the growth status of the microorganisms, because we also have to remember that if the conditions are not suitable, then some organisms may die as well, and so all those factors will creep in. And if you do not have a proper statistical model to look at these, then probably your experiment will not be successful. You cannot infer from your experiment. So it's very important, statistics. Now, bacterial populations differ by the same pattern. So basically 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4. Okay, so here the multiplicative factor is 2. So in maths, we've learned, that you have this multiplier concept. So when you transform, like for example, any population that grows with a constant factor, okay, that will appear as a straight line if you convert those numbers in a log manner or a log plot. Okay, so when you transform your data, okay, you are putting it in the log scale, then that becomes a multiplicative scale. Okay, so tick marks on the left hand side, okay, they tell you the factor at which the population is growing. So I'll show you this graph, it will be clear. Yeah, now you can see that we have taken a log of each value. So what I have done really is that this entire thing I have taken log of each colony. So log of 2, log of 4, log of 8 is what I have taken, and this can be very well done in the Excel, and you have to do that, and this is what you will come to. Okay, so I'm sure all of us have used log tables sometime in our life, and we know that log is something that exists, so don't have to explain that really. And so this is how we get. Now from this graph it is very clear that the organisms are growing, okay, in a linear fashion is what the steady growth in the organism. So this is useful. So that is why generally bacterial growth, when we are studying, we actually use a log scale. Okay. Now for the benefit of those who do not know logarithm, okay, so what is logarithm? The logarithm is the inverse function to exponentiation. That is, logarithms count multiplication as steps. A logarithm is the power to which a number must be raised in order to get some other number. Okay, for example, here I have written log 100 to the base 10 is equal to 2, because 10 raised to 2, that is 10 into 10 is equal to 100. So it is just a way of writing. Okay, or for example, log 8 to the base 2 is 3. Why? Because 2 into 2 into 2 will give you 8. So you write it as 2 raised to 3 is equal to 8. So this is just a way of writing. Okay, this makes the life simple. So that is why we have to use logarithms. Now we come to another important aspect, and a lot of people find difficulty in understanding the distribution functions, and not to blame them. We've never taught this way. So, but never mind, we'll just try to explain to you what is a distribution function and what is the importance. So basically these functions, distribution functions, tell us how the data is distributed. Okay, so they tell us the relationship between the outcome of an event and its frequency of occurrence. So when you know that, when you know how your measurement function has performed in the past, okay, you can more appropriately analyze, how it will behave in the future. Okay, so measurement uncertainty in microbial analysis is based on Poisson distribution. It is not Poisson distribution, it is Poisson distribution. Okay, so we will see what is this Poisson distribution. Okay, see what happens is that a lot of time we have a lot of data, okay, but we cannot make out anything which is useful, informative about that data. And how do you do that? That is done using various statistical techniques, using distribution functions, probability functions. Okay, and therefore we have to study them, okay, if you want to find out some meaningful inference from your experiments. So let us quickly see what is Poisson distribution. So it is a fully random distribution of particle numbers. Here particle numbers are nothing but your colonies, okay, when sampling the suspension, because bacteria don't dissolve in water, so they are obviously a suspension. Then variance is equal to mean. Observations are made in whole numbers. We don't find colonies of 1.8 or 1.5. So observations are made in whole numbers. Each object or number is counted, and it's a small fraction of total number. Okay, so even if you say we don't say one colony or two colony, we say colony forming units, because in that one CFU there would be multiple microorganisms. So that is why it is said that it is a small fraction of a total number. So this is how, when you have conditions like this, you are supposed to use a Poisson distribution, and this is a mathematical equation. So probability of X happening, okay, X is any event or whatever, that suppose we say colony is being found, is equal to lambda raised to X, lambda raised to X into E raised to minus lambda upon X factorial. I know this is, we will have to accept it as it is, okay, without questioning any further, okay, because we have to move on, okay. But if you go on Google and if you find out what is Poisson, you will get loads of information. So basically lambda is the mean number of successes over a given interval, and X is the probability. What is the probability that a particular sample will have growth? or will not have growth. So that is explained by this particular formula. Now let us see the sources. I said we will start with the sources of uncertainty in microbiology. So in microbiology, these are the sources. Sampling is of course the first one, but this is out of scope because it's a different topic in itself, and we are only talking about testing here. So let us exclude sampling as such. The next is the preparation of initial suspension. Okay, of course there is homogenization first that I have missed out. Then there are serial dilutions, media and reagent quality, inoculation technique. Then there is incubation techniques. Okay, then there are counting colonies. Okay, so how do you do all that? And if you do not do it correctly, it will give rise to uncertainty. Now, when I started working on this webinar, went through a lot of data and found out that only these, ISO committees have worked a lot on individual methods of ISO, like maybe in drinking water, or it may be MPN. A lot of work has been done in ISO committees. There are a couple of documents from US FDA or UCAS, but UCAS basically is more, or EURAChem is basically more on, again, chemical uncertainties. Then there is NMKL. This is a Nordic committee, right? Like the Nordic region, the Norway and the Finland. And I must say that they have done amazing work. Like as back in I think in 1994 or something, they already had the documents for measurement of uncertainty in microbiology. Okay, so they have done a very good job. And of course, then there are individual contributors. They are very selected, of course. And so that's what I'm saying, that uncertainty in microbiology, it is still not very well explored, so these are the major contributors. Just for your reference, I have made this slide. Now the whole presentation that I have made today webinar is basically based on ISO document. Okay, the ISO is 19036 and there is a recent revision 2019, and that is the base document that I have referred to. Okay, and I have a notification, Kavita. Hello. Hello, Kavita.
Yes, ma'am. What?
The basis for this webinar presentation is on 19036/2019. So let us find out what are the various terms used in this particular ISO. The first one is a sample. So for the sample, one or more items, okay, selected in some manner from a population, okay, intended to provide information representative of the population and possibly to serve as a basis for a decision on the population or on the process which had procured it. Okay, this is a very typical ISO definition, all confusing. So to be very precise and very easy to understand, it means that laboratory sample is, suppose for example you want to export a 1 ton of some product. Okay, you will not send 1 ton of sample or the entire sample to the lab. You will obviously take out some representative sample, okay, maybe some from some boxes and some others from some other boxes, and that's how you will mix it. So that's what makes a sample. Now when you say, so probably out of 1 ton you would just send a 500 gram, okay, sample to the lab for testing. So that becomes a sample. Okay, now laboratory sample is what? Sample prepared for sending to the laboratory and intended for inspection or testing. Okay, so this 500 gram that I said, so 1 ton is the entire sample that you're talking about. 500 gram sample is the one that you would probably send to the lab for testing. Okay, so this is laboratory sample. Then comes the test sample. Sample prepared from the laboratory sample according to the procedure specified in the method of test and from which test portions are taken. Okay, so some methods may say that you weigh 10 grams, some methods say you weigh 75 grams. So depending on what method you are using, what organism you are testing, you would take out a further subsample of the sample, so that becomes your test sample. So if, for example, if you're doing a method say from Staph aureus, you would probably take 25 grams, so that becomes your test sample. Then comes the test portion. So measured representative sample taken from the laboratory sample for use in the preparation of initial suspension. So you would take 25 grams and you would probably suspend it in 225 ml of a diluent, so that becomes your entire test portion. So it is very important for you to understand what are these different definitions. Now some statistical concepts trueness measurement or measurement trueness, basically it is called. So it is nothing but closeness of agreement between the average of an infinite number of replicate measured quantity values and a reference quantity value. Okay, so trueness is nothing but suppose you know that in a particular sample it is not possible. I'm just giving you an example so that you understand it. Suppose that in a particular sample there are 10 colonies, okay, and if your measurement gives you 2 colonies, then you are far away from trueness. Okay, and if you get a reading at say 9 colonies, then you would say that you are probably very close, okay, to the true value. So that is why it is trueness. So closeness of agreement, and it is how close you are to the true value. Okay, then comes the bias or measurement bias. It is an estimate of systematic measurement. Okay, now the systematic measurement is not in the scope of this particular ISO 19036. They have clearly written it in the starting that this is out of the scope. And in basically in systematic measurement error, a lot of error might come from the method itself. Okay, because some aspects of the confirmation techniques or whatever dilution techniques are not properly addressed, so that would come, but it is not under discussion currently. The next is intra-lab reproducibility or intermediate precision. Now what is this? This is closeness of agreement between test results. So basically this is precision. This is nothing but precision. So what is the closeness of different values that you get? Okay, and so how the closer they are, the better. Okay, so closeness of agreement between test results obtained with the same method on the same or similar test materials in the same laboratory with different operators using different equipment. Okay, yeah, then comes the standard uncertainty. Standard uncertainty, uncertainty of the result of a measurement expressed as a standard deviation. Okay, so this is standard deviation basically. Then combined standard uncertainty. So as the name suggests, it will combine. It will combine the different uncertainties. Okay, so just don't go in the definition details because it is very confusing. Combined is a very simple word. You have to combine different uncertainties that you calculate. Okay, expanded, obviously it is, we have to expand. So what is that? A quantity defining an interval about the result of a measurement that may be expected to encompass a large fraction of the distribution of values that could reasonably be attributed to the measurement. Okay, so expanded uncertainty, because see, I told you that 1 ton sample you only get 500 grams in the lab, and you only test 25 grams, and in that 25 also you only take 1 ml, and in duplicate you run it. So look at the risk that you are doing. Okay, so you have to compensate for this risk somewhere. So how do you do that? So you basically try to expand the uncertainty that you get from the combined uncertainty. Okay, this is just to lessen the risk basically, and to accommodate any deviation that might have happened in the sampling, subsampling, whatever. Coverage factor is the one that will actually expand the combined uncertainty. So expanded uncertainty will have to have coverage factor multiplied by combined uncertainty. So coverage factor is what? Number larger than 1, okay, by which a combined standard uncertainty is multiplied to obtain an expanded uncertainty. Okay, the next is the technical uncertainty. These are all given in the ISO, and you can go back to the ISO and refer to them once again. Technical uncertainty, it is resulting from operational variability associated with the technical steps of the analytical procedure. So technical steps meaning they'll tell you homogenize, and you vortex, then you take out 2 ml, then you centrifuge, blah blah, whatever. Okay, so all that are technical steps, and there would be variation, okay, which will arise from these technical steps that will give rise to technical uncertainty. Then the matrix uncertainty resulting from the extent to which the test portion is not truly representative of the laboratory sample. Okay, so basically from 500 grams you have taken 25 grams, okay, and that may not be representative. Okay, so that is matrix uncertainty, because some samples are not really homogeneous. Okay, they have different what do you say, compositions, and therefore matrix uncertainty will come into picture. The next is the distributional uncertainty resulting from intrinsic variability associated with the distribution of microorganisms in the sample. Okay, the initial suspension and subsequent dilution. So at various places we will find distributional uncertainty. For example, generally the microorganisms grow on the surface. Okay, so if you take only the sample which is coming that is from surface, okay, the result would be different. Okay, and if you mix it properly and if you take it, then the result would be different. So the microorganisms, they are distributed very unevenly in the matrix. Okay, and therefore these kind of uncertainties will arise. We will have to consider all of these. Now let us first see how the technical uncertainty is calculated. So before that, let us quickly see technical uncertainty. This is just a recap. Technical uncertainty arises from operational variability. Okay, the matrix uncertainty arises from the distribution of microorganisms in the food matrix. Distributional uncertainties arises from intrinsic variability associated with the distribution of microorganisms in the sample. Okay, so these are the three uncertainties that are very important. Okay. Then comes the technical uncertainty. First, let us see what is it. The contribution of most input quantities is estimated as a standard deviation of the reproducibility of the result of the measurement process. This is technical uncertainty. So this is nothing but standard deviation. In short, if you want to remember, technical uncertainty is nothing but standard deviation which is coming out from reproducibility exercise. Okay. Now, I'm not really sure whether the concepts of reproducibility and repeatability are clear to the attendees, and I have not included them in the webinar in the slides. So I'll just mention what is reproducibility and repeatability. So basically, repeatability is the conditions of the testing remain the same. Okay, same operator, same instruments being used. Okay, and this is repeatability, whereas reproducibility is wherein you carry out experiments using different microbiologists on different days, probably different media, different strains are being used. So that is basically the deviation in reproducibility is more, and in repeatability it is very less. Okay, so basically technical uncertainty is nothing but standard deviation of reproducibility. Okay, and it is calculated from experimental results with replication of the same analysis. So it is the same analysis that is done multiple times. Contribution from technical uncertainty is the largest. Okay, so you can actually, if there are any chemists here, this looks like more of type A uncertainty, because we're doing multiple experiments and we are finding out what is the standard deviation, and then we find out the uncertainty. But in chemical, we have a factor which divides the standard uncertainty with a root n thing that is not present here. It is just the standard deviation that is considered. Now, what are the sources of technical uncertainty? So basically, taking a test portion from the lab sample, your test sample. So what test portion are you exactly picking? Okay, so that will also decide the count. The preparation of the initial suspension. Okay, how are you making the initial suspension? Then the serial dilutions, then the inoculation, then incubation, then of course counting of colonies in a colony count technique, okay, or detection of growth like as an MPN technique, and then confirmation wherever it is applicable. So these are, if you make any mistake in these steps, then you will end up having deviation, you will end up having uncertainty. Okay. How to calculate? Okay, so now as per the ISO guideline 19036, okay, there are three approaches wherein you can calculate the technical uncertainty. So we are going to see the first one, which is intra-lab reproducibility, that is reproducibility estimated within a lab. Okay, so this is very much doable basically, and every lab can do it. Okay, you don't have to rely on any other lab to support you. So this is possible. The next is the reproducibility derived from results of a method validation inter-lab study. Okay, so the ISO and the other AFA or whatever, these kind of organizations, they carry out a lot of method validation studies. So they do have access to this kind of data. Okay, and so their reproducibility that they have found out during these validation studies also can be used to find out the technical uncertainty. And the third is the reproducibility derived from results of an interlab PT, that is proficiency testing. Okay, so these are the three approaches can be used. You can use any one of these. Okay. Now we will see the first approach, that is the intra-lab reproducibility. Okay, so this is just a small picture again taken from ISO. So we have a lab sample, 500 grams. Okay, test sample, we take out 25 grams, for example. We homogenize it, and then we make two test portions. So from the 25 gram, we add 225 ml, for example. So we have a 250 ml entire sample. Okay, and from the same sample, we make two test portions. Okay, and the two test portions again are taken in duplicate. So 1 ml on one plate, 1 ml plus 9 ml of course, and then taken on two plates. So every experiment will be carried out in duplicate, but from the same test portion. Okay, and here then we will go ahead with initial suspension, whatever, and the analysis, and then we will get the result. Okay, now they've also given this option of artificial contamination. Okay, but artificial contamination, there are a lot of other factors that we will have to take care of, and therefore my advice to you would be not to go ahead with artificial contamination. There are a lot of steps that you have to conform to, and it is better that you take a sample which is naturally contaminated. It is better. Okay, so now let us see how do you actually conduct this exercise to find out technical uncertainty. Okay, remember, this is the first part, this is the first step of uncertainty that we are calculating. Okay, now how do you conduct the experiment? Okay, the estimation of intra-lab reproducibility is designed to exclude contributions from heterogeneity within the lab sample. Okay, so 500 gram, we are not trying to find out which part of 500 gram has growth or does not have count or whatever. So we will not go into the heterogeneity of the main lab sample. We will just stick to the 25 gram sample that we have found, we have taken out, and we have made two test portions of it. So we will only restrict to that. So heterogeneity of the main lab sample is excluded. Okay, then the next is the calculation that we do, okay, to count the colonies. It uses a log transform data to normalize the intra-lab reproducibility variance, and therefore it is not necessary to repeat the experimental protocol for different contamination levels. A lot of time this is the concept that is used in chemistry, that we say that the uncertainty for the 0 to 1% and 50 to 60% will not be same, and therefore various ranges will have to be worked out, okay, for uncertainty. But that's not true. At least in microbiology, the ISO says that you need not repeat the experiments for different contamination levels, okay, because it is in the log form. Then however, wherever possible, the laboratory samples should be chosen to cover the expected natural variation in contamination levels. So you are aware as a microbiologist that what is the typical level of microorganisms that you get in a particular matrix. So you should try and use those representative levels, okay, for your experiments. Then in order to minimize matrix uncertainty contributions, okay, the laboratory sample or the test sample, in cases where the laboratory sample is too big to homogenize, should be made as homogeneous as possible. Now when I say that 500 gram of sample, you should thoroughly homogenize it, and you should take 25 grams of it, so that you are not giving rise to any other matrix related uncertainty in the experiment. Okay, so try to homogenize the entire 500 gram and take 25 gram. Okay, so this way your matrix uncertainty would be reduced. Then at least two test portions should be taken from the homogenized sample to allow repeated measurements that we've already seen. Then the measurement conditions of A and B, like, okay, so A and B portions is what we've seen here. This is A and this is B. So in the down arrow, this is written different conditions A and B. So we will see what does that mean. Okay, because this is not repeatability experiment, this is reproducibility experiment. Okay, so the deviation in the testing has to be as far as possible. Okay, so we will see what is this different condition means. Okay, yeah, so different conditions. Okay, so these will typically include but not limited to batches of culture media, reagents, membrane filters, vortex and other mixers, pH meters, incubators, time of analysis, etc. Okay, if possible, the two test portions should be tested by at least two different technicians or two different microbiologists. Okay, so we've taken 25 grams in 225 ml and we've made this one big test portion. Okay, so each, maybe more than one microbiologist should do this experiment and should take out aliquots from this particular test portion. Okay, the next is as the contamination of the food sample is rarely stable in food chain microbiology, the measurement repetition should be done within a very short period time of a single day, on a single day. So you cannot just keep that 25 gram into 225 ml test portion, okay, in the refrigerator, and then on the second day you can analyze. No, that's not permitted. Okay, but if you have a valid reason to believe that the composition is not going to change, the microbiological what do you say, characteristics are going to be the same, then you may do it, but that has to be done with caution. So generally what we have to do is on the same day we have to complete the experiment, okay, for technical uncertainty, that is reproducibility in the single lab. Okay, So this is what 500 gram lab sample. Okay, then you homogenize, take 25 gram, take the use the diluent, and then use different test portions. Okay, so that it will complete the cycle. Now you do this experiment, you inoculate the plates, you incubate them, and whatever 5 days, 3 days, whatever is the time period, then you get the results. Now how do you decide whether your experiment was successful or not, and whether the results can be accepted or not? So here is the guideline for that also. It's given in ISO. They've said that for colony count techniques, okay, ensure that a sufficiently large number of counted colonies can be used for the calculation. Okay, enumeration results based on less than 30 counted colonies, okay, should be excluded, as well as counts above the maximum number plate, in most cases 300 CFU per plate. And this, we all know that this is what generally the norm that is followed, so that if the count is TNTC, okay, too numerous to count, we will not consider those results, and very low results also will not be considered. Okay, now when I say that the colony count should not be less than 30, it is considering the both the plates. Okay, so if on one plate you have 10, 20, and on another plate you have 10, you can consider that as a valid result. Acceptable results, yes, for the MPN methods. Now MPN, you know that you have so basically for MPN you have a positive and a negative outcome. So where the gas is formed, the color has changed. Okay, so if you are running a 5-tube method in triplicate, that is a 3 different dilutions, then you have total 15 sets of tubes. Okay, and what the standard says is that out of 15 you should at least have, okay, 5 positive test results. Okay, so out of 15 test tubes that you have prepared for MPN, if only 3 tubes give you a positive confirmation, then you should not take into consideration that MPN count, that the entire experiment is not valid. So at least 5 positive test results have to be there, okay, to calculate the intra lab reproducibility. Now we've done all that, we've got the results which are more than 30 and less than 300, and MPN also probably more than 5. Now how do you calculate the technical uncertainty? This is the formula. So this looks as a little intimidating, but it's okay. I can now show you the Excel. So one sec, how do I show you the Excel? One sec. Yeah, can you see the Excel? Is it visible, Kavita?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, just a second. Can you see the now? I think this also has to be. Okay, so here this is one example of intra-lab reproducibility. Okay, and maybe I should just zoom it a little bit. Okay, so now this is what we have done. We've taken 2 analysts or 2 microbiologists have performed this experiment. So this is A, this is B, and they have done different dilutions, and this is what they have obtained. So the dilution factor and the colonies, they are written as D1, C1, D2, C2. Then what you do is you count the total colonies. Okay, so in first case, if you see 102 plus 8 colonies, it is 110. Now what you do is you use the weighted mean formula that you do every day, I think in the microbiology lab. I don't have to explain you that. So by that calculation, you get this as 10 raised to 5, I think. Okay, now once you get this, you convert it to log. How do you convert it to log? You just type is equal to log into bracket this cell. Okay, so if I can just, yeah, this is how you find out the log value of the colony count. Okay, now once you do that, drag it, just drag it down, and you will get the results. Then what you have to do is you have to take the difference from means. Okay, so this is what it means, that you have to take the difference basically of the two. So 5 minus 4.7579, this will give you the difference. Now likewise, you drag for all the results, Okay, we've taken total 10 experiments in duplicate, so we have 20 results totally. Okay, and this is how you will take the difference and then you will square it up. Okay, okay, square it up and then you add them up. Now what we are trying to do here, why are we doing all this? Okay, remember that we have to find the standard deviation. Okay, the when I was showing you the Poisson distribution, okay, I mentioned that variance is equal to mean. Okay, now sorry, I again, this just reminds me is that I have not really told you what is variance. Variance is nothing but sigma square, that is standard deviation multiplied by standard deviation. Okay, so now what we are trying to find out is we are trying to find out the variance. Okay, that is the mean, because in Poisson distribution variance is equal to mean. So what we will do is we will first find out the variance, that is nothing but mean, and we will take a square root of that. So that is why we are doing all this stuff. Okay, so we've done this subtraction, then we have basically variance is will tell you how far your result is away from the mean. Okay, and that is why we have subtracted all the values from each other. Okay, so that will give you the difference between the values from the mean. Okay, so once you get the variance, so this is basically when you add it all up. Okay, you have to add it all up and you will get the summation. That summation is nothing but variance. Okay, variance is same as mean if you are considering, if you are talking about Poisson distribution. So now we've got mean basically. Now what we have to do is that we have conducted 20 experiments, so we will have to divide it by 20. So this is what I have done. Okay, and standard deviation is nothing but root of variance. Okay, so sigma square, root of sigma square is sigma, so standard deviation is square root of variance. So this is what you do, square root k27. K27 is nothing but variance. So this will give you standard deviation. Okay, so for this particular experiment that we've done for intra lab reproducibility, our standard deviation is 0.2589. Okay, and remember that this is in the log term. Okay, log value. Okay, so this is how you do the intra lab reproducibility. Okay, now let us go back here. Just you again go back to the PowerPoint presentation. We will have to come back also again for another Excel, but that's fine. I'll just, yeah. So now we come to this. So we've used exactly the same formula that I have shown you here in the slide. So this is it. Yeah, so what we have done is we have actually subtracted the log counts. We've taken a square of them and divided it by 2, that is 1 by 2n, sorry, that is 20 in our case. Okay, and then we've taken a square root of the entire thing. So this will give you standard deviation of the intra lab reproducibility. Then that was the first method of finding out technical uncertainty. Then we go to finding out the second option, that is the reproducibility standard deviation derived from the other means, which is the first is the inter-lab method validation study. Okay, now how does this study, what are the advantages? We will see what are the disadvantages. The advantage is that you really don't have to do anything. Okay, you just directly take the value from somewhere and just use it. Okay, so where a method used by a lab has been submitted to an inter-lab validation study, the lab may use the reproducibility standard deviation of the method as an estimate of its technical uncertainty subject to the following condition. Okay, what is that condition? The repeatability and reproducibility estimates of the precision attained by the measurements within the lab shall not be greater than the corresponding values obtained in the inter-lab study. I know it sounds very too technical and you probably have not understood anything. So for example, if I am a lab and if I have participated in an inter-lab method validation study, okay, and for me, I have reported a standard deviation of say 0.25, okay, and if the overall outcome of the inter-lab method validation study, okay, gives that the standard deviation actually is say 0.2, okay, in that case I will not be able to use my lab's standard deviation for the technical uncertainty. Okay, so they say the repeatability and reproducibility estimates of precision attained by measurements within the lab shall not be greater than the corresponding values obtained in the interlab study. Okay, so this is it. But there are limitations, of course, to this value being used directly from the interlab study. What is it? The first is the reproducibility parameters derived from interlab method validation studies are not available for all methods. Okay, so only I think if you are aware, then I think Listeria has been studied, E. coli has been studied, but there are so many other parameters which have not. E. coli, I think, yes, E. coli also has been studied, but not all microorganisms are studied in this way in the interlab method validation protocols. So what are you going to do for those parameters? Okay, so that's the limitation. The second is that generally when method validation studies on an international level are done, a lot of care is taken to homogenize the sample and standardize the sample. Okay, and they will tell you that you have to use this particular culture, okay, MTCC or ATCC or whatever. A lot of harmonization is done, okay, when the samples are sent out and when the protocol also is sent out. So what happens is that the deviation or the deviation that happens in the regular testing, okay, that's not the way it turns out in the interlab validation study. And therefore what happens is that the uncertainty is underestimated. Okay, so if you directly use a value that is coming out from the interlab method validation study, probably you are using an underestimated value of uncertainty. Okay, the next option, the third option probably, is the interlab proficiency test. We all take part in the proficiency testing, and I wonder a lot that the international bodies like LGC, PAPAS, they have so much of data, you know, and they keep asking us. Now when I was preparing this, I came to know that why do they ask for such a large number of you know, questions. So many questions, that which method, what incubation temperature, how many days, and you know, a lot of information they ask. So why are they asking it? Because they want to find out whether the labs that are participating, they are all using the same method or not. And if they find out that they are using the same method, then probably they can use the standard deviation arising from those values, you know, and for their technical uncertainty. So that's what they can do. So basically there are other challenges also when you use this interlab proficiency test reproducibility value. What is that? There's a criteria that is very important, is that all the labs have to use the same method. Okay, and see, we all are working in the labs, and a lot of times I would not say a lot of times, okay, let me correct myself. Sometimes we may, you know, twist the data. We may say that we performed a particular experiment using XYZ technique. In reality, we might not have done it by that way. We have might have used a different agar, a different broth, or whatever. So how reliable that result is also is a question mark. Okay, then reproducibility values from a PT will have been obtained under limited and precisely defined conditions. This is the same point as the earlier. Okay, so because a lot of homogenization studies and lot of standardization has been done when the PT sample is shipped to the labs. So the natural levels of contaminant, the natural deviation that happens in the routine testing, okay, will not be calculated here. So again, the PT value reproducibility result also will be an underestimate. Okay, therefore the ISO suggests that the preferred choice is intra-lab reproducibility. Okay, Atmanirbhar bano, kind of. Okay, then the matrix uncertainty. So this was so we have seen the technical uncertainty. Then the second is the matrix uncertainty. And the third one was the distributional. Now we are looking at the matrix uncertainty. So why we have to consider matrix uncertainty? So while reproducibility provides a general estimate, okay, of uncertainty associated with the measurement method, the technical protocols that we saw, it might not reflect characteristics associated with the matrix uncertainty, that is resulting from the distribution of microorganisms in the food. Okay, now matrix uncertainty arises from imperfect mixing of lab sample, okay, resulting in poor reproducibility of microbial levels between test portions, which can be large for solid matrices and especially for composite food products. A product like say pizza, okay, so it's a very good example wherein a lot of different varieties of food products are on it. But test result can be affected by both matrix composition and microbial distribution. Okay, in ISO document, the term matrix uncertainty refers only to the effects of microbial distribution in a given matrix, that is variation between results, okay, from different test portions taken from the same lab sample. So again, we go back to the same example, 500 grams of sample coming to the lab. Okay, so what is the microbial load in the entire 500 gram sample? Okay, so in one particular 25 gram, it may not be the same as the other 25 gram of the sample. So that will give rise to uncertainty, and the effort here is to find out what is the entire microbial load on the entire 500 gram sample. Okay, so we will see what are the methods. Okay, this is one more thing that I want to tell you, is that the matrix uncertainty is considered to be independent of the analytical method. Okay, and therefore matrix uncertainty estimated for a matrix can be applied as matrix uncertainty contribution for all quantitative tests in this matrix. So if you study a cheese sample, okay, for various parameters, and you arrive at a particular matrix uncertainty value, you can directly use that matrix uncertainty value for calculating some other parameter. This is what it means. How to calculate? Okay, so there are three approaches to finding out matrix uncertainty. The first one is using a fixed value. Okay, using a fixed value in the sense relying on someone else's data, basically ISO's data. Okay, this is the first one. The second one is the examination of multiple test portions from lab. So you do entire lab experiments and you find out for yourself what is the matrix uncertainty for cheese sample, for meat sample, for fish sample. You know, that is multiple test portions from the same lab sample. That is the second way. The third is the relevant characteristics of the matrix and the method are well known, and the matrix uncertainty may be estimated from prior knowledge. Basically, again arising from the multiple examinations of the food samples. Okay, so let us see the first one. So use of a fixed value. The study indicates that liquids, basically we all know that this is no brainer, that water, milk, you know, these are generally very homogeneous, and generally they will not have a much matrix uncertainty. So typically for these samples, ISO has a data I have given at the bottom. You can see that there is this download which is freely available. And what is this data is all about is that they have studied various food matrices. ISO has studied various food matrices for different organisms, and they have found out the matrix uncertainties. Okay, and there is a table given. Okay, so for cheese sample, if you want to estimate yeast and mold, you know, what is the matrix uncertainty? So all that is given. This is readily available, and you can directly use it from this particular standard. And this cross reference also has been given in the ISO 19036, so you can certainly use this directly. Okay, and so what they are telling is that for a very homogeneous sample, the uncertainty due to matrix is low, and it is just 0.1 log 10, okay, value of the entire matrix, so you can directly use it. But effective homogenization is a must. Okay, like when I am sure when the ISO also studied all this, effective homogenization was the key to the success of finding out matrix uncertainty. Then comes examination of multiple test portions. Okay, so matrix uncertainty may be estimated as the within lab sample repeatability. Okay, here they have not used the word reproducibility. Okay, so we will see how that is done. Okay, and yeah, so this is the same similar, I would say. This is a similar diagram that I shown you for the technical uncertainty intra-lab reproducibility. Okay, so now again what we are doing is we are taking a lab sample, okay, 500 grams, okay, and what we are now doing is that we are taking 25 grams one portion, 25 grams one portion, 25 grams third portion, and from those 3-4 different 25 gram samples we are preparing our test portions. Okay, so this is the difference. Okay, now since we are already having different test samples from the main lab sample, okay, we don't want to introduce one level or two level of more deviation, okay, by allowing multiple microbiologists to do the experiment. So now what our focus is to study the matrix. So what ISO is recommending is that when you are studying the matrix, keep all other parameters constant. So use only one analyst, one microbiologist, okay, and let him perform the experiment. Use the same kind of reagents, use the same kind of the growth medium or whatever. Okay, use the same incubator and things like that. So keep all the conditions in the repeatable types. Okay, so that is why at the bottom they have written repeatability conditions. So here we don't want to introduce more uncertainty by having multiple microbiologists to do analysis. Then we don't know whether the uncertainty is arising, that is arising from matrix uncertainty, or because of the different technicians being performing the results. Okay, so this is what we have done. Now we have multiple portions of 25 grams and we have suspended them in different 225 ml diluents, and then again we proceed and duplicate as earlier. Okay, now what they are saying is that examination of multiple test portions, what is the guideline? The tip is that use naturally contaminated samples. So we won't do go spiking, etc. That's a bad route. The next is the measurements should be chosen for which naturally contaminated samples are likely to be found. Okay, so yeah, that's also very logical. Now, there are two options given by the ISO, is that what they're saying is that you can take 2 test portions, okay, from each 10 lab samples, or you can take 11 test portions from 1 lab sample. Okay, so anything of this you can do. Okay, but all of them have to be done in duplicates. Now examination of multiple test portions, I will show you the Excel. Okay, but when you get the results, how do you know that the results are acceptable or not? It is the same criteria that we saw in the technical uncertainty, that the count should be more than 30, and for MPN, if it is there at least 5 tubes, should be positive and things like that. So that is all same in this case also. Okay, so now let me go to the Excel. How this is the Excel will tell you how we calculate the matrix uncertainty. Okay, one sec. Matrix uncertainty. Give me a moment, I'll just have to shift everything again on this side. Sorry, this is a little bigger Excel. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so here you can see that again it is the same type of experiment that we saw here. It's the same one. Okay, like this, it's the same one. The slight deviation, okay, in that here strictly we had done 2 replicates. Here it is possible that you can do multiple. Okay, so more than 2 also is okay. Same way we do different dilutions, we count the colonies. Okay, and then by the weighted mean we find out the number of colonies. Then we go to the log CFU. Then we take the log value, mean log value. Sorry, here there is a little difference, is that we actually take out the mean. Okay, and then we find out the difference. So here is what we do. Okay, we subtract the individual observations from the mean. Okay, so that will give you difference from mean. Then again you square it. Okay, and then you add all the squares. Okay, that will give you variance. Okay, variance has to be divided by n. Okay, total number of observations. Now here is a little different concept of degree of freedom. So what unfortunately it is covering, one second. Okay, so here what we've done is that in the first case we have done 3 experiments. Okay, so 4 experiments, sorry, one second. How many have we done in the first case? Okay, yeah, so in this case we have done 3 experiments. Okay, the purple cells. So degree of freedom is n-1, which is 2. Okay, so now why in the earlier case we just divided it by 20, and in this case we are using degree of freedom for the calculation, is that because that was one experiment, one single experiment. Here we are dealing with different independent analysis. When you are dealing with different analysis, okay, you have to have a degree of freedom, okay, into consideration. And this is just to avoid avoid the underestimation of the value of the uncertainty. So when you are using different experiments to find out the reproducibility, you are supposed to use a degree of freedom concept. So here it is 2, in this case it is 1. Okay, and in this case it is 3. So that's how you add them up and it is 16. These are some statistical requirements that we have to understand, and we have to use it, and we will not go into the details of why and how it is derived and things like that. So when a lot of people have already worked on this, I think it makes sense to use it directly. And but just remember that when you're talking about independent analysis, okay, and you are coming to some conclusion, you will have to use degree of freedoms. Degree of freedom is generally n-1. Okay, so here it is 16, I think, in our experiment. Yes, it is 16. Okay, so what you will be doing is now you will be dividing it by 16. So this is what it gives you. Okay, 0.9854 divided by 16. Okay, and then you take a square root of this. So that will give you standard deviation. So 0.2482 is the standard deviation. Okay, now this is how you calculate the matrix uncertainty. Okay, now that you have it, okay, let us go to the other examples. How do you calculate the matrix uncertainty for other examples? So the third option that is given is, the third option given is known characteristics of the matrix. Okay, so the laboratory may be able to judge from prior knowledge the matrix uncertainty to be expected of a given lab sample, and this may rely on previous analysis of multiple test portions from the laboratory sample. So basically it's the same thing, that either you use the data that is coming from ISO, or you can use it from your own study. Okay, and when assessing whether the lab samples can be expected to have a similar matrix uncertainty, the laboratory may consider ISO 16140 part 3. This, I think, I'm not really sure whether this has arrived, but this was under preparation, and it will, if not, it will come out very quickly. Okay, so you can refer to those different categories which are mentioned in the ISO. The next is the distributional uncertainty. So we are done with technical uncertainty. We have found out how to calculate that. We've seen matrix uncertainty, and we found out how to calculate that. Both are pretty much the same. The only difference is that in technical uncertainty, we can carry out reproducibility environment, and in the matrix, we find out we carry out repeatable conditions. Okay. The third is the distributional uncertainty. Why is distribution so different in case of microbiology? Because generally microorganisms will contaminate the surface. Okay, then there are some which will contaminate only the bottom, that is does not have much of oxygen. So depending on the which microbe you are talking about, they will behave differently. So contamination could be in different pockets of the food sample. So that is one reason why the distribution is unequal. Then growth of microbes. Now, for example, imagine a foodstuff that is already contaminated, okay, and it has gone unnoticed. Okay, now when inside the foodstuff, the microorganisms will start growing, and when they grow during their reproduction, when they grow, what they do is that they stick to each other, okay, and they form clusters. So in one pocket you may have a big cluster of microorganisms, whereas the other pocket may not have any microbes. And if you do not mix the sample well, you will end up having a uncertainty of distribution. The next is the processing of food products. Now imagine raw materials being mixed. Okay, different raw materials will have different microbial loads, and depending on how they are mixed also will tell you how they are distributed in the bigger sample. And the last is the fractionation of food products. Okay, that is basically when the food product is, for example, ready, how is it packaged. So if a food sample that is already contaminated goes in one packet and the other one does not get the contamination, then you know that there is a difference. Okay, so that is the other reason. Now uncertainties may arise, okay, in the following three cases. We will see a couple of them. There is one colony count, okay, method, the colony count with confirmation, and the third one is the MPN method. Okay, a lot of people are curious to know how the MPN distributional uncertainty is calculated, so we'll see that. Now colony count, I have told you, I have shown this equation to you earlier also. Colony count for distribution uncertainties, it is always a Poisson distribution, and so this is the equation which is given in the ISO. Okay, so there is the uncertainty due to Poisson or distributional uncertainty is equal to 1 upon natural log 10 divided by square root of summation of colonies. Okay, so summation of colonies is our X happening. Okay, what is the probability that the contamination is occurring? So that is number of colonies. So for example, it is said in the ISO that if the summation of colonies is 100, then how do you find out the uncertainty due to distribution? So this is the formula, okay? 0.4343 divided by root 100. Now, where is this 0.4343 coming in from? It is coming from 1 upon natural log 10. Okay, like we have log to the base 10, there is something called natural base, that is E. Okay, and if you divide this 1 upon natural log 10, the value that you get is 0.4343. Okay, so it is a constant. Okay, and even if you get zero number of colonies, this constant is going to be there. This is because of this equation. You can see that x factorial, it is the colonies basically that we get. So if this is zero, okay, the number of colonies are zero, that it becomes 0 factorial. 0 factorial is nothing but 1. So don't think that because it is root 0, it is 0. Okay, this distributional uncertainty 0.4343, even in case when there is no colony observed, E is going to be there. Okay, so this is then I have shared another example. If the colonies are 9, then it becomes root 9, which is 3, so it becomes 0.14. Okay, so this is how you calculate the uncertainty due to distributional differences or deviations in the colony count method. Now we come to the MPN method. Okay, now MPN is analyzed using this it is quite popularly mentioned in the ISO 7218. Now this 7218 is a very extensive and a very detailed ISO, and I think if you have not referred to this ISO, please go through it. It's a very useful ISO. A lot of information is already given in it, and actually the standard deviations are already given in the ISO 7218. Okay, and so we will see how the MPN, if you are carrying out the uncertainty of measurement for MPN analysis, then the variability, okay, intrinsic distributional variability in MPN technique, how do you calculate that? I'll show you. Okay, we again go back to the Excel, but this time this is a ISO Excel. Okay, so now what I want to tell you is that the ISO 19036, okay, it gives you a reference of this ISO Excel, and it says that you can go to the ISO website and you can download. Okay, so you can, so actually I went on the ISO website and I have downloaded the Excel from the ISO. I'll just show you how that works. Okay, so this is the Excel. Okay, and it asks you, like for example, when you begin, a lot of instructions there, and what you are supposed to do here is that you have to put the date of experiment. Okay, you have to mention how many test series are you doing. So in this case I have put 5, and I'll use 3 different dilutions. So basically 15 different dilutions is what I will be looking at. Okay, and then they ask you for the input data. This is available freely on the website of ISO, and even the ISO 19036 gives a reference of that, gives the website address. So please go and please download this. So this is what I have done. For example, these are the dilution factors 1.1, 0.01. I have put in the value and I have put in the number of tubes, and let us assume that this is what I got, 4, 0 and 1. Okay, this is one example. Now if I go here, if I go here and if I say calculate, yeah, if I go here and say just calculate result, okay, yeah, so it will tell you the result. Now this result will also give you, yeah, this is so result of the MPN calculation. So this is what you will get. So your 401 was our first experiment wherein we found 401 as a number of positive tubes. Here the MPN count is 1.7. You can actually go to IS 7218 and check when you have 5 test tube experiments in triplicate, what is the MPN that you get. It is in reality it is 1.7. So this table also gives you the same thing. It also gives you the standard deviation. This is automatically calculated from the ISO sheet, and therefore ISO also is recommending all of us to use this Excel. Okay, and in addition to that, it also gives you a lower and upper limit. Okay, so how do you use this? Then I have also used another example. This is 4011 example wherein 1.7 is the MPN count. Then there is another example, okay, wherein let us assume that we have 500, same dilution, same number of tubes, we have 500, and if we put that, we get this result. And this also I have counter checked with 7218, it is 2.3, and standard deviation is 0.24. So please don't get upset when there is an Excel coming out and you're not sure how to fill it. Go ahead and use it. It is very useful. Okay, this is also useful when you have some odd dilutions being made. Okay, like 0.0001 or something like that. This works very well. I have tried it. We will see that also after some time. Okay, so please use this Excel. Okay, so this is how you calculate the distributional uncertainty in the MPN analysis. Okay, now we go to the next. Yeah, so now we found out basically different types of uncertainties in microbiology. So there is technical uncertainty, there is matrix uncertainty, and there is yeah, and there is distributional uncertainty. Yes, so these three types of uncertainties. Now what we have to do is we have to find out the combined uncertainty. So what is the approach that we will take? When I presented the webinar last time, a lot of people asked me on email that what is the difference between there are two approaches. We've heard that there is a bottom up approach and there is a top down approach. So what is that? What is it all about? Okay, so it is nothing but a approach to find out whether the combined uncertainty, how do you find out combined uncertainties. So what is this approach? I'll tell you. Basically, bottom up approach. So a bottom up approach is what? It is a combination of separately estimated uncertainty components arising from technical uncertainty, matrix, and distributional uncertainties. So if you want to use a bottom up approach, what you will do is that you will find out these three uncertainties separately and then club them up. This is called, sorry, this is called as a bottom up approach. Okay, and what is the global approach or the top down approach? Top down approach is that you only consider the reproducibility of standard deviation. Okay, so the very first experiment, technical uncertainty, intra lab reproducibility, if you want to use that, okay, as the only source of uncertainty or component of uncertainty, it is called as a top down approach. Okay, so or in fact if you also use the interlab method or interlab PT result, okay, that is also the top down approach. Yeah, so technical uncertainty, if you are using a top-down approach, technical uncertainty, why they have recommended top-down? Because technical uncertainty actually gives you the maximum contribution in the total uncertainty, and therefore it is okay to use just the technical uncertainty. And what ISO is saying is that if your customer is okay with you using the top-down approach or only the reproducibility standard deviation approach for the reporting of uncertainty, they are allowing it, so you can use. Also very logical is that you have to invest a lot of time and energy, effort, cost to work on the bottom up approach. So you will individually work out everything, then add them. So instead of that, global or top down approach is very easy. Okay, so people may just use that. Now let us come to some examples. So the first example, colony count method. Okay, and here as I told you, three different components. This is a technical, matrix, and Poisson, and we will see two examples, colony count method and the MPN method. Okay, now so colony count method, we saw this Excel wherein I showed you that the U technical. Okay, we did the intralab study. I showed you the Excel. Okay, that Excel had the uncertainty of arising from the technical operations, that was 0.2589. Okay, and so I've directly taken it okay for time being here. Now since we are working on the bottom up approach, okay, what we will do is we already have the UTech. Okay, we will also find out the these two contributions from Poisson and matrix. Now, how do you find out the Poisson? That is the distributional uncertainty. Is that, suppose this is the experiment. Okay, this is one example that I have taken. These are the colonies that you have found in one particular experiment that you have performed. Okay, and so you found out the weighted mean, and these are the colonies. Okay, 57273. You convert them to log. So 4.7579 is your result of one analysis. This is your result. Okay, and now what you have to do is you have to apply the formula that is given in the ISO, okay, which is 0.4343 upon square root of summation of all colonies. Now colonies that we obtained were 63. Here it was 63 total colonies. Okay, so we have directly taken that, we have made a root of that, square root, and 0.4343 divided by square root of 63. That will give you the uncertainty due to distributional uncertainty or distributional errors, you can say, or Poisson distribution. Okay. Now you want to know whether this contribution is significant or not, because ISO also mentions that if the contribution is not significant, you may exclude it. Okay. Now how do you check whether the contribution is significant or not? Okay. So what you have to do is you have to divide the Poisson uncertainty by the technical uncertainty, and it should be more than 0.2%. What does that mean? Is that it means that the contribution from the Poisson uncertainty should be at least 20%. 20% is nothing but 0.2. Okay, so it should be at least 20% of the total uncertainty. If it is, okay, then you can use it. So it is actually more than 0.2. So we will have to consider the Poisson distribution uncertainty. Okay, and this is, we will consider it afterwards. Now the next is the matrix. So now what happens is that here, just for simple understanding, I have considered that this is a homogeneous matrix, and I've directly taken this liberty of using the 0.1 log 10 CFU. Okay, this is for the homogeneous sample, so I've directly used it. So again, we want to find out whether the contribution from this matrix is significant or not. So again, the same formula we will apply, and we find out that the contribution is 0.386, that is 38.6%. So again, this is very significant, and we will also have to consider the component of matrix uncertainty. It may so happen in some cases that this could be very negligible and you may omit it. Okay, so this is how now we will do it. 2589 was our intra-lab reproducibility in the Excel that we did. So this is 2589 square. This is a very standard definition of combined uncertainty. You can refer it. It is available on in the EURAChem guideline also. So you have to make squares of each uncertainty, add the squares, and take a square root of that. So that will give you 0.28288 as the combined uncertainty coming from all the sources. Okay, so we have used a bottom up approach here. Okay, then we have to find out the expanded uncertainty, which is they have said in the ISO that you have to use 2 as a coverage factor. Okay, so if you do that, then it is 0.5658. So how do you report the result, final result? 4.76 plus minus 0.57 log 10, log to the base 10 CFU per gram. So this is your final answer with uncertainty, okay, for the colony count method. There is other example of MPN. Okay, now MPN, we have to find out the U technical. Okay, here I have said that let us assume that we have taken this number or taken this uncertainty from an interlab method validation study, and it is say 0.49 log 10 to the log to the base 10 MPN. Okay, and it is based on the 20 replicate test. So this is already here UTech. Okay, but you can also derive your own UTech. Okay, and the second one that we have to consider is the U distribution, because we are talking about the bottom up approach. We will have to consider all 3 uncertainties. So the U distribution or U MPN. Okay, now what we have to do is that suppose you carry out this single experiment wherein you actually find out the MPN of a particular sample. Okay, so you have to carry out 5 tube 3 dilution method. Let us assume that you used an inoculum of 1 ml and dilutions are these. Okay, these are very atypical dilutions, and this is what you obtain from the result. So 4 positives, 2 and 1. Okay, now what you have to do is you have to fit it in the ISO spreadsheet. Again, I will have to go to the ISO spreadsheet. Oh my god. Okay, so we will put here 4 2 1. I have already put in. I'll just show you. Yeah, so here is this. Okay, so I have already put in the 4 to 1. We've used 5 tubes. We have used 1 ml as the volume, and these are the dilution factors. So when I put this and when I say calculate, I directly get the MPN. Okay, so this is the one, 260 MPN. Okay, and if you convert it to log, it is 2.4, and the standard deviation is 0.19. You can write it down so that when I show you the next slide, probably you will can correlate. Okay, so 260 is the MPN, log value is 2.4, and the standard deviation is 0.19. Okay, so now we go back to our calculation. Okay, and this is what you do. Okay, so I have written it here, 2.4. Okay, is the result. Okay, and the uncertainty due to distributional errors or Poisson distribution uncertainty was 0.19. That automatically came out of the ISO Excel, and then we found out whether it is significant or not. It is significant, so we have to consider it. Then comes the matrix. Again, I have considered that it's a homogeneous matrix. You can also please go back to the ISO website and also download the ISO document which talks about the matrix uncertainty. It is also very useful. So you can use that, and you can choose depending on what matrix you're using. You can take it directly from there. So again, I have taken that it is 0.1, and again we find out that it is significant because U matrix, that is uncertainty due to matrix upon technical, is more than 0.2. So now we again add them up, okay, all these, and this is the uncertainty. And expanded uncertainty, we know that you have to multiply by 2. Okay, so a lot of deviation, you can see 2.4 mpn plus minus 1, okay, in terms of log value. So this is our final result. Okay, so just a recap, if you're using a top-down approach, you only have to consider the technical uncertainty. Technical uncertainty will come out from the intra-lab reproducibility study. Okay, that is the most recommended by ISO. So that is one approach, and the bottom up approach is basically you find out 3 different uncertainties, mix them up all, and then you combine them basically and multiply it by a coverage factor. Okay, so that is the bottom up approach. Now once you have the results, how do you interpret those results? Okay, so this is a classic case wherein the extreme right and the extreme left. Okay, suppose that there is a regulatory limit for coliforms in some product, and it is 10 raised to 3, for example, okay, CFU per gram. Now let us assume that the result that your lab has got is 10. Okay, so and let us assume that the uncertainty is very negligible or whatever. So the result is, along with the uncertainty, okay, is completely inside the regulatory limit, below the regulatory tolerance level, and therefore the product number which is mentioned in IB, that is the 4th one, extreme right, it passes. Okay, then there is the extreme case wherein the result is entirely outside the tolerance level or the upper control limit. Okay, and the uncertainty associated with that result also is above the tolerance level. So in these two cases, it is very easy to report the result, okay, and to be sure that yes, the result is the product is conforming or not conforming. But when it comes to the cases which are mentioned in the middle, okay, we have a problem. We do not know whether we have to pass such a sample or fail such a sample. Okay, what do we do in this case? Okay, so I just want to, basically it's a risk that is associated. So for example, if the consignment is immediately flying to some importing country, okay, and if it's a dry sample, then you may take risk. Okay, but if it's a shipment that is going by sea route, which is going to take 2 months, for example, and if the sample, if the consignment is contaminated, it is only going to grow. Okay, so the risk of failure at the importing country is very high, so nobody would like to take such a risk. Now this is something that I have just made it just to make things lighter, because a lot of calculations and a lot of technical stuff is enough now. Just want to imagine that you are an entrepreneur and you are coming into some business and you want to export a lot of things, you know, and that's why you meet customers and abroad, okay, and you come to know that they're very happy to receive your product, but they say that you will have to produce a certificate, okay, of compliance, and safety is very important, and you will have to comply to their specifications. Okay, and the specifications include some microbiological testing, coliforms, E. coli, whatever, and you agree that, you say that yes, we can get this done, and then we'll be okay to ship the consignment. Okay, so you go to a lab and you tell them that you will have to, you know, test the product, and you have to have a confirmation report on the test report. Okay, so that's what you do, and you go to the lab. Okay, and you think that your product is all very good, you are a producer, you are very confident about your product, and you feel that your product is the best in the world, and you know nobody can challenge it, and so you're expecting a good result, everything complying, you know, and then the lab result comes, and this is the argument that happens. So basically, why is this happening? The producer thinks that his sample is very clean. Okay, the entire shipment is very nice, it is good to go, good to be shipped. Okay, and the result cannot be, you know, beyond the tolerance level. But whereas the lab says that the count is more, okay, and the lab cannot take the chance and it cannot pass the sample. So when this type of a situation arises, it is very difficult, because finally what it is doing, it is hampering the entire trade, global trade, okay. And so basically there are two types of risks that we have to understand. There is a consumer risk and there is a manufacturer risk. Now as a lab also, we are ultimately, all of us are consumers, okay. So it is important that a non-compliant product should not reach the market, okay. Especially I would say that this is very, very important when it comes to microbiological testing, okay, because one colony can grow to many colonies in due course of time, and if the one colony is undetected, or if it is not reported, or if the sample is passed as a confirmed sample, it may, you know, play havoc. And food poisoning, you are aware that food poisoning is the worst thing, and a lot of people die because of that. So consumers risk is very high, and basically it's a safety hazard if it is not taken care of. And manufacturers risk, yes, that is also important, because at the end of the day we all have to survive and we all have to make money, okay, that's also true. So when you say that this the entire shipment or the entire consignment is contaminated, or it is contaminated is a wrong word, it is basically it has microbial load, then basically there is a lot of cost and you know, trade implications involved, and a lot of stakes of the manufacturer or the producer are involved, okay. So basically I have not included the, although I had written in the webinar abstract that we will be also explaining to you about decision rule. So now what has happened is that when I was studying for this webinar, I did not find a single communication, a single reference on how the decision rule is to be applied for the microbiological testing, okay. Because chemical testing is a different aspect, okay, the values don't increase, okay, after a period of time, but that's not the case with the microorganisms. If you report 10 microorganisms today, it will become plenty in due course of time, and even if it is, you know, in the limit as of now, okay, it may exceed. So how that particular call has to be taken is a very is a matter that we all have to debate upon, okay. And there are things that, these are things that I have observed during my preparation, and that's why I made the next slide, which is about way forward. What I have observed is that a lot of time as microbiologists, okay, uh, microbiologists, I don't want to blame, or I don't want to label the community as such, but somehow they're not very comfortable working with numbers, okay. A lot of time hatred of maths and, you know, calculation, probably, I'm not, again, spare me, I don't want to really say that every time this is the case, but it is generally the case that people want to avoid math, okay, and they opt for microbiology. And then when it comes to statistics and, you know, numbers, they really get confused. They are actually very worried that how do you calculate this uncertainty. And also not many contributions from India as such, I have not seen them, okay. So my request to all of you attendees is that please come forward. Statistics is not a dreaded subject, it is simple, and fortunately now we have Excel, we have Google. You please go on the Google, you put in whatever you want, you get everything. So please go and please work on this, try and find out the uncertainties involved in your area of testing. And the third one is not really a way forward, that is not something that we all can do, but if there are any educationists here attending this webinar, it's a sincere humble request from my side that please include a course of biostatistics, okay, in the graduate and postgraduate levels of microbiology or biochemistry, okay, because the students have to be aware of the statistics, and it's not a big deal. Techniques like F-test, okay, or ANOVA, these should be known to my young microbiologists, and if they are made comfortable in their college days, I'm sure they will be able to use them in their day-to-day you know, analysis when they enter the professional world. So I think this is just a suggestion. I hope this is taken positively. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge my microbiology colleagues. Miss Kavita, whom I have called up so many times asking questions, Dr. Nilesh Amritkar for the technical support and suggestions, who actually explained to me what MPN is, and, you know, how the microorganisms they grow and what characteristics, etc. So thank you both of you. Now I wanted to especially thank a very, very dear friend of mine who is Dr. Pallavi Manohar. She's working at IISER Pune, and she teaches applied mathematics there. And in fact, when we were discussing this, I asked her a lot of questions, and that's how I came to know that she doesn't know anything about biology, and I don't know anything about statistics. So that is something that there is a huge gap there, and we both agreed that we should close this gap and we should have such courses in the microbiology discipline as well. Then would like to certainly thank Mr. Srinivas Joshi and Dr. Kaushik Banerjee for giving me this opportunity. Big thank you to Kavita Rana, and thank you attendees. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on this email ID, and my phone number is also given. So thank you so much.